Welcome to In the Envelope, an awards podcast. I am your host, Jack Smart, awards editor at Backstage. I'm here to give you a front row seat to the Emmys, Oscars, SAG, and Tonys races. Who is in the running? What makes an award-worthy performance? And what are the secrets to giving one? These intimate, inspirational conversations with some of today's most talented stars provide you, dear listener, the kind of craft and career advice that could win you a statue of your own, and maybe, just maybe, a tantalizing glimpse in the envelope.
The things that cost you energy are normally worth doing, I think.
Yeah.
It was a little bit later that I learned that, but that thing, it's a cliche that people say, but nothing worth having comes easy. It's never a truer word said.
Podcast studio stand.
Yes.
And I think if we talk with our voices like across like that,
Okay.
it's at our height. So, because before we were like, eh.
Yeah.
So now this pail is helping us.
Okay.
And I think we're good. I'm gonna listen back to this, but this is my first time sitting down to record for a while.
It is.
Right?
Yes.
We're getting back into it.
We are getting back into
The podcast is back.
It is back. It's back and ready to go.
Ah!
I know, it's kind
Welcome.
of crazy.
Welcome, listeners, and welcome. Do you want to reintroduce yourself to our listeners?
Yes, I'm Sam Sherlock, helper of the podcast.
Indeed. You were last year on Deborah Messing's behalf, I believe.
Yes, I was here on Deborah Messing's behalf, which was so fun. One of my favorite episodes.
Yeah, I like this co-host thing of being here on behalf of someone. Today we are here to talk about Taron Egerton.
Yes.
Whose voice we should have just heard.
Yes.
What do we know about him? He's in this movie Rocketman.
Yes. That's pretty much all I know.
That's pretty much it.
But he was phenomenal
right?
in Rocketman.
Stunning. Elton John. He's playing Elton John. A young Elton John.
A young Elton John. Yeah. I'm a huge
Right.
Elton John fan. Huge. So when I sat down to watch this movie, I had very high hopes. And he brought it.
That's got to be a tough gig to be like, oh, I'm playing Elton John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was very...
That's a showman.
Yeah. And it was very, like, it was a mirror. He mirrored him.
Visually.
Yeah, visually.
Vocally,
which was very impressive too,
Wild.
because I think before I watched it, I looked it up to see if he actually sang in the movie, and it said that he did.
Which I always think is so much more impressive.
It was very impressive,
Yeah.
because like I said, I'm a big Elton John fan.
Yeah, and Elton John's like a great singer, but he's also an unusual singer. He has an unusual voice.
Yeah, totally.
So Taron has to sing well, but he also has to do it in a way that walks that line, that really fascinating line that an actor sometimes has to do of, do you imitate? Do you copy? Mm-hmm. Do you make it your own? You gotta make all those decisions, basically.
Right. And mostly in the movie, he's putting on the performances. So he's also singing and putting on these elaborate performances. So just doing all of that and probably never having done that before.
Not at this level.
No, is just like a whole other
I'm curious
thing.
to see what Taron's background is and where he learned how to do all this stuff.
I know.
Because spoiler alert, we are recording this before I'm interviewing Taron out in LA. But we are really excited to have him on the podcast because it's film award season, it's underway, and he is a leading actor contender.
He is.
In a major motion picture.
That's crazy.
It doesn't get bigger than Rocketman. And
No,
Elton John.
it really doesn't.
Did you see recently they had, they did like a concert of singing along to the movie, and it was Taron and Elton together.
Yes, I did see that.
That was so epic.
Yes.
Can you imagine?
Elton and him are like BFF
They're
now.
actually friends.
Yeah. Elton is like super supportive of him, like loved the fact that he did the movie.
Yeah. It's just like fun, Hollywood. It's super well done. And Taron's amazing.
Absolutely.
We'll get into a little more of the rest of his oeuvre, the rest of his work. And yeah, we'll get to this amazing interview with Taron, which I'm sure is going to be
I cannot wait to hear it. It's going to be fabulous. Maybe he'll sing.
I know. Well, are we allowed to?
I don't know.
Oh.
Ask him.
Let's ask him to ask Elton to give us permission.
Great idea.
Well, thank you, Sam, for stopping by and helping me introduce Taron.
Anytime.
Anytime.
Always here for
I'm gonna
you.
call you again. Reminder to listeners, follow us on our Facebook page at In the Envelope and on Twitter at In the Envelope.
Absolutely.
Sam's doing a lot of awesome content creation. What do we call it? Content promotion, getting people engaged with the podcast.
Yes, follow us. It's so fun. And we'll always have sneak peeks of our episodes.
Yes.
New and sometimes old stuff.
Totally. We're about to hit a stretch of really exciting people.
Yes.
Awesome.
More to come.
Thank you.
No problem.
This episode is brought to you by Universal Pictures' Us, starring Academy Award and SAG Award winner Lupita Nyong'o in an acclaimed dual performance as a woman who must defend her family against a terrifying and mysterious opponent, doppelgangers of themselves. For your SAG Award consideration in all categories, including Outstanding Performance by a Female Actor in a Leading Role, Lupita Nyong'o, and Outstanding Performance by a Cast in a Motion Picture. Taron Egerton is an up-and-coming star best known for action comedy Kingsman: The Secret Service and its sequel. Raised in Wales and trained as an actor at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, he's played several real-life figures on screen in The Testament of Youth, Legend, Eddie the Eagle, and this year's Rocketman, the dazzling Paramount Pictures musical starring Taron as a young Elton John. Please welcome the fabulous Taron Egerton. I just moved to LA 3 days ago.
Wow. Shit. Where from?
Well, from New York. Backstage is based in New York.
Okay.
We don't really have an office here or a presence here, but now I'm the presence here.
So you are here representing Backstage in all its glory?
Yes,
all
exactly.
Its sunlit glory?
Exactly, yes. I'm escaping winter is what I'm really doing.
Yeah, nice, man.
I'm originally from Hawaii, so I'm
you're a vitamin D kid.
Yes.
Yeah.
I need vitamin D.
Yeah, fair enough, man.
You are from... you were born in England, but you're from Wales.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, my family are from Liverpool in the north of England, although my grandmother was Welsh. And when my mother and father separated, when I was, barely out of diapers, we moved to Wales. My mother moved to Wales to get a university degree, and so I don't really have any memories of not living in Wales.
Right.
Obviously, when I was 19, I moved to London to go to drama school and stuff. But yeah, I feel very Welsh, and it sort of, I don't know. Once you've spent time there, it's a place that you kind of fall in love with very easily. It's not somewhere that it's not something you can forget about. It's outstandingly beautiful, and the people are amazing, and it's got a very rich cultural heritage in terms of art and also sport and music and.
That'll always be home.
Absolutely, always be home, and I have a home there, and
okay.
and I sort of yo-yo back between there and London.
Gotcha. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And here only for promotional purposes, or
filming?
Yeah,
here for mainly promotional purposes, particularly this year. I have filmed here a little bit in the past, but I love it. The older I get, the more I love LA. Actually, I think it's got a lot to offer. It's got a lot to offer in terms of all those things you become more aware of, I suppose. Now, I'm still very young, I'm imminently 30, but you start to want to be a bit more health conscious, I think.
Sure.
Just when you hit milestones, you start to realise that you've got one life and you've got to look after your body, and LA is a great place for all that. With wonderful food and health classes and things.
Yes, the stereotypes are true. People take care of themselves here.
They do very much.
Which I like. Yeah.
They do. I think it's about having. From what I can gather, and certainly my experience of it has been that once you've found your tribe and your community, it's much easier, because I think the thing about it to begin with is it's so dispersed.
It's super spread out.
And it can just feel overwhelming. It's like, how does anyone build a social life? You've got to plan a social life, I think.
Totally.
But I'm sure that'll just take a minute, and you'll be fine and happy. And browner than you would have been otherwise. Cool, man.
So we're with Backstage. We are the Actors Trade publication. We're all about the early career acting advice.
Sure.
I'm going to ask you questions about where and when you got started and how all of that goes down. And first of all, what was it bit by the acting bug? When was it acting, or why acting?
I think when I was a kid, I naturally gravitated towards creative things, but before my teens, it manifested more in making things with my hands. So I love drawing, and
cool.
I was very into sculpture, working with clay, and I did all those things for lots of, from a really young age, and just found it myself. My mother made clothes when she was younger, and my dad's a musician, so there's definitely a sort of creative streak in the family. But it wasn't until I was 15 and I joined the youth theatre in Aberystwyth, my hometown, that I really I think I'd been watching, in the early part of secondary school, I had been watching other people engage with performance from afar and kind of think, oh, I quite fancy that. Yeah, I wonder. And then I think I fell in with a couple of guys who are still my sort of best friends now, who were doing a class at the local arts centre, a community theatre thing, basically, for young people. And I, took one of those leaps of faith and signed up, which is, sounds like a small thing, but at that age felt like quite a daunting thing. It's one of those little leaps of all through my life. It's those little moments of just doing things that scare you that always yield great results, and that was one of them. I remember being intimidated by it, but did that. First production we did was a Midsummer Night's Dream. Okay. And we all auditioned. Did a sort of general audition. The group of 40 kids that were a part of it, and I ended up playing flute. The bellows mender, who's one of the mechanicals, and that character has a bit of a funny time of it because he's one of the more youthful-looking guys of this troupe of part-time actors, and so they decide to make him Thisbe. He plays Thisbe, who's the female heroine really of the play that they put on. Now, for me at 15, it felt a little bit like a baptism of fire, and I was very, very intimidated at the prospect of having to do it.
Was it mortifying, the woman part?
I was honestly, I was losing sleep over it at the time, and we came to do the performance, and we did 3 nights of performance at a studio space in the Arts Centre, and I had a little sort of pink cocktail frilly dress on with little shoulder straps and makeup and a wreath of flowers in my hair.
Yes.
And you know what? It went so well, and I got such a warm response and lots of laughter that that night, I really think I knew that night. First performance, that was, if I got bit by a bug, it was that night. Whether it was acting at that point or just being the centre of attention, I don't know. The craft maybe came later.
Fine line, yeah.
That's when it all started, and then carried on at that youth theatre and eventually auditioned for drama school when I was in my late teens.
Right, somewhere between there, it must have occurred to you, I could do this for a living rather than just for fun.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was very, very, very fortunate in that although I'm from a very modest background. I have parents who have always been incredibly supportive of me and my acting. They were always very excited by it, rather than being cautious voices in the background. Yeah. And I will always be grateful to them for that. I remember, I auditioned at 5 drama schools the year I got in. The second year.
5, okay.
And each one, I couldn't afford to audition for any more. The 5 drama schools was 5 audition fees of £40. And £40 5 times over is what, £200? And then the train fare down to London is £60, so that's £260. Wow. And then my stepfather and I stayed in a youth hostel in Piccadilly as well, which I imagine was probably about £40 again, or something like that. £300.
You got to count it all up.
It's massive. I didn't have that money, but my family, my mother gave me £40, my stepfather gave me £40, my aunt gave me £40, and my dad gave me £40, and I was also working as well. So I had. Basically, my family came together to provide me with this opportunity.
Right, to try.
Yeah, exactly. I think that as investments, they've all made quite good returns on that now.
That's right.
But I will never forget that. I will never forget that family support. It's so important, I think, that you aid and support your children in their dreams like that, and that's exactly what I would want for my kids. And I have a great family.
And you feel that pressure going into those auditions, of course.
A little bit, yeah, that's very true. I did feel that way. I did feel, you want to thrive for the people around you as much as yourself. And but luckily, there was a misfire the first year, but the second year of auditions, I ended up getting a couple of places, actually. I was very, very lucky. The first year, I didn't get a single recall anywhere, and a year's difference.
Which happens. Well, some people, years and years. So.
I think I was slightly chaotic. I don't think I was very well prepared. And I think I was in a phase of my life where I felt that I had to portray some sort of persona, some sort of put out some sort of version of myself, and I think it probably came off as a little bit youthful and a bit silly and just a bit overconfident, probably. Or maybe not, or maybe thinking or maybe coming off as very nervous and sort of trying to mask it with a confidence that wasn't really there.
Yeah.
But the second year I got a place, and I ended up accepting my place at RADA, and I was there for 3 years.
Like you say, it's those moments it's the fear leading up to it that sort of makes it worth it, or that makes it pivotal. Like that's by taking a big risk, that's what changes the course of your life.
Yes, exactly. And it's just it cost you something then as well. I think the things that cost you energy are normally worth doing, I think.
Yeah.
It was a little bit later that I learned that, but that thing, it's a cliche that people say, but nothing worth having comes easy. It's never a truer word said. I think if there's one little bit of wisdom I've gleaned in my relatively short life, that's it, I think.
Yeah, and it makes it more fulfilling when you do get success.
Yes, of course,
in the life of an actor.
Absolutely, yeah.
So then was it just after RADA? What did you learn at RADA, first of all? Everything.
Yeah, lots at RADA. I mean, you learn a lot. I think one of the most important things they say to you, and they say it to you in the first week, is you're going to hear a lot of different things from lots of different actors and lots of different specialists in their field, whether they be voice people or people who specialise in classical text or sight reading or whatever. And some of the things they say will be conflicting because it's a subjective thing, the craft, and that's why people have different, methods of working, and I felt that the one universally true thing that I was told constantly, and I could feel when I applied it to my acting, although it took a while, but was just this idea of listening and responding and having using external stimulus and what's around you to fuel and feed your performance rather than self-generating, which is, I think, what lots of people do because, but when they're young, I mean, that's how before you think of it in that way, I'm sure, the greats, Saoirse Ronans of this world, will all kind of do it instinctively, but, as she just demonstrated when she was a 14-year-old kid in Atonement, but I couldn't have I couldn't have done that because I needed to train to learn that stuff. And I think listening, that's the really important thing, listening and responding. And then there's all sorts of technical technical stuff that's good for particularly, I think, theatre and in terms of having a strong voice and being able to fill a space like that, really, both in terms of movement and the use of your instrument. And that becomes less important, I think, when you're doing screen acting. But of course, there are very different unseen bits of craft that go with that as well.
Yes, and the preparation and the...
But I had a good time there. I found it, like most people, I think, will say of drama school, you have some really rough days there because, you are constantly putting yourself out there, performing, acting, and being reviewed and analysed, and that's a funny place to be in. The impulse to do that is an odd impulse in actors to sort of, whether it's something to do with acceptance or whatever, or I'm sure it's different for different people. But you have rough days, but you also have glorious days where you feel really creatively fulfilled, and those moments where little bits of craft click into place and you feel like, oh, I understand that now. That I remember those moments as being glorious,
That's cool.
But yeah, I was there for 3 years, and in my third year was very lucky in that I I was able to get a really good agent, Lindy King, and Lindy is still my agent now, and she's a real titan in her field, in terms of UK actors. She's, partially responsible for the careers of Ewan McGregor and Tom Hardy and Lindy King and Keira Knightley, and these are all people she took from the same level, drama school or younger, and
okay, wow.
so she was a great person to have on my side in the early days, and when I think just being represented by her opened some doors and got me in rooms with some good people.
Yeah, well, and it seems like, because I wanted to ask if RADA is mostly meant for, like you said, theater training.
Absolutely,
yeah. You can then apply to screen acting, but was screen acting ever was that the end goal? No, never. But that,
when it came. No, that's really ridiculous. Of course I entertained the idea that it might happen.
Right.
But, from that, the percentage of actors who have thriving screen careers are in the decimal points,
right.
So that to me was always like, you can't plan for that, because you not only do you have to obviously be talented to get the work after drama school, but you have to be lucky, and you can't account for luck.
Yep.
So you don't plan for that. What I thought I could do is, if I worked hard and I remained passionate about what I wanted to do and still had a bit of luck, then I would have a healthy theatre career where I was doing exactly what I wanted to be doing and making enough money to make ends meet. I think, a theatre career in London isn't going to get you a palatial home, but that's not what I wasn't pursuing the career to live an opulent lifestyle,
Right, okay.
But then the screen thing happened within a year of being out of drama school. I left early and went to do a play at the National Theatre, and that was my first job. And I skipped.
What play was that?
It was a new play called The Last of the Housemans, written by Stephen Beresford and directed by the late, great Howard Davis. Oh. And it was myself and Rory Kinnear, Julie Walters, Helen McCrory, and a couple of other really lovely actors as well. But it was a six-hander. And
so a pretty big first gig out of school.
Yeah, it really felt it at the time. It was, it really felt like I don't know that I've ever, that job, the getting of that job, I don't know that I've ever hit the same high again of getting, in terms of just getting an actor, a paid acting job. Yeah. That first call of saying, oh, you got the job was, kind of sweeter than any of the other ones that have come since, really.
That's cool.
So I did that and had a really good time, and then went to the Royal Court Theatre, which is quite a well-known new writing venue in London.
Yeah.
And it was whilst I was doing that second job that I got a television series for Sky, and it was during the making of that television series, which was about firefighters in London, that I got an email. Of course, it was not an open audition, but they cast the net fairly wide, obviously by virtue of the fact that I got the call to audition for Matthew Vaughan's new film, and I read the scenes, and I remember where I was when I read the scenes. I was on a street corner in Holborn, London, and I read them, and I don't know if you've seen that film, but there's a scene where my character, who's called Eggsy, sits in a pub with Colin Firth's character, and they have a pint together, and then these thugs come in, and Colin kicks the crap out of them. And I read that scene, and it sounds ridiculous, but I read it, and I thought, I should play this part. I've got to play this part.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was going to, but I felt.
You wanted to.
I wanted it so badly, and I just thought, I can do this. There's some, I don't know. I mean, we're from different worlds, me and that character, but I suppose I just felt that I am of the same class, although I'm from a rural bit of the world and not an urban background. But something of his swagger, but also, you know, I've always drawn to the vulnerability in things, and there was a vulnerability to that character, and particularly in that scene as well, where he exposes something of himself that feels, I don't know, Colin's character is making assumptions about him, and he loses his temper and sort of shows that there's a dimension to him beyond what he's first, I don't know, and it was just a lovely scene, and anyway, I ended up going and auditioning for that, and
how many auditions for that?
At least 5, maybe 6.
It's not a walk in and book the part kind of.
No. Because also I think Matthew had a battle on his hands, because I don't think the studio were initially overly enamoured with the idea of casting a complete unknown.
Right. It's always fascinating when that happens. So that is its own risk.
Yeah, you know, I mean, and I know some of the other actors who are up for that part, and they are. They're like serious young British actors, you know, who are gone on to do amazing things. And I was very, very, very lucky. And I think Matthew, just something about Matthew and I, we've become very, very, very close friends. And he's been involved with most of my high-profile films, you know, and Eddie the Eagle and Rocketman, and both Kingsman films. And but he has always just believed in me and championed me, and been a fan of my acting, and that was the start of our relationship, really.
Wow.
He did put me through my paces to get that part, though, and I'd never experienced anything like that. I'd never experienced auditioning on a sound stage with a camera crew and makeup, and you know, they'd got in another actor to read with me, and the actor was like fairly well known, you know, and I was like, it was I wouldn't say who it is, but it was someone I'd seen in. It wasn't Colin. Colin was shooting a Woody Allen movie, I think, in France.
But they brought in somebody else.
Yeah, so they brought in a
huge deal.
It was crazy, you know. It just felt like something. It just was a really weird experience, but and I ended up getting the part, and obviously, made the movie, and it went on to be a success, and that was the start of my sort of career, really.
Yeah. Was there any the fact that it's an action movie and you're pretty much an action hero in that movie?
Yeah.
Is there like an added element of training for that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, particularly in the first one, I managed less well in the second one. I was going through quite a tough time.
Oh.
But in the first one, I really did get in serious shape. I was, I remember one day just realising that I could climb up and down a rope, for quite a long time without using my feet, just my hands, you know.
Wow.
And I'd never been in the gym before that job, you know.
Okay.
So it was a weird thing to feel my body transform, and because I really was in quite good shape. I've never been in quite that shape again. I think something to do. It may have been, maybe that I was, I don't know, maybe something of being 23 made it a little bit easier. Actually, no, it felt really hard. But maybe I don't know, maybe, yeah.
But that's the life of an actor. Some jobs will require that, and then
yeah, exactly. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the challenge of doing that, and worked with great people, incredible stunt team and trainer, and the movie went on to be really, really great. You know,
yeah.
I was really proud.
And I love this idea of it sounds like for each script you're maybe looking at your something connects, like something about the tone of that character and the tone of that movie really.
Yeah, what you mean in terms of.
Yeah, like, is that how you look at your scripts? You're looking for a character you can relate to, even if it's not the circumstances of the character. It's something about.
I think I like things that have dimension and they have moments of contradiction in them. I think things where it's like characters can be lots of different things within one script at different times. You want an arc. You want to feel like the character undergoes on a journey and changes at some point. And I like things that have an opportunity to show vulnerability. I think, even if it's a sort of an imposing person or a a kind of relatively assured, confident person. I think unless you feel like, and personally, I like to feel like I can envisage ways of showing some weakness or fallibility or vulnerability. Actually, weakness isn't the right word. Vulnerability is the right word. But and I like. Yeah, I don't know really. I don't know. I guess it's things that move you, isn't it? You know, if you're moved by something and you genuinely connect and engage with it, then I think you're going to be more invested in creating the film.
Yeah, and finding moments to kind of reveal that vulnerability.
Yeah, exactly.
This episode is brought to you by Universal Pictures' Queen and Slim, the unflinching new drama about a black man and a black woman on a first date who are forced to go on the run after they shoot a police officer in self-defense. As they drive, these two unlikely fugitives will forge a deep and powerful love that will shape the rest of their lives. Starring Academy Award and SAG Award nominee Daniel Kaluuya as Slim, and introducing Jodie Turner-Smith as Queen. For your SAG Award consideration in all categories, including Outstanding Performance by a Cast in a Motion Picture. I like hearing about See, I've been thinking recently on this podcast about asking people about their process, or about like their, what resonates with them in their work and why they play a certain role in a certain way, and whether that's universal for every role. And sometimes I feel like people don't like to talk about it because they don't necessarily know themselves exactly what that process is, or by naming it doesn't quite get there, or it cheapens it or something. I like this idea of vulnerability.
Yeah, I think it's not something that I had thought of consciously.
Right.
And then, other people, I'm lucky in that I'll be interviewed by someone or discuss someone who's seen my work as familiar, and they will say something that about that they like about my acting or something, or like about my films. And one of the things that people have said to me a lot is that they feel that I'm a vulnerable. There's a vulnerability that they connect with, and I really the first time I heard it, I wasn't quite sure what to make of it. But I really like it. I really like that, and if it does characterise the parts I play, then I'm cool with that, because I'm not particularly interested in seeing someone who's invulnerable.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's why Superman runs up against problems time and time again, because he's sort of perfect, isn't he? Do you know what I mean?
Kind of boring in a way. He doesn't,
So I quite like that, but
it's that distinction too between vulnerability and weakness, like you
yes,
said.
exactly, yeah.
It's a positive, or weakness is more. It's not necessarily positive or negative. It's more like you can do more with vulnerability.
Yeah, I saw The Irishman this week.
Oh yeah,
and it's sensationally good.
Cool.
And Al Pacino's amazing in it, and he's amazing in it because, or for all the reasons that Al Pacino's always amazing. But what I really love about the performance is it's a really unvain performance. The character is vain, but the actor's not, and he's very. There's a real vulnerability he has in that, and a kind of, a sort of perfect imperfection to him. It's an awesome performance. I was kind of blown away by it, but I was watching it thinking that about him, because although it's a tough guy movie, it's a Scorsese mobster movie. Actually, what I really love about The Irishman is that the guys in it, they're tough guys who aren't always that tough. Right. And it's a really, it's really, it's Goodfellas. Goodfellas is one of my favourite films, but they're tough guys in that, Whereas in this, it's more like, what's the cost of Goodfellas? That's what it feels like to me. Cool. It's like a more sober answer to the question of Goodfellas.
The tough guy thing is the genre in which you can play. Yeah. Not necessarily, you don't want to play someone invulnerable.
No, because no one is.
Right. You're trying to play humans.
Yeah, exactly.
People.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Well, so talk to me about Rocketman. How did you get involved? Was that also an extensive audition process? Did you know Elton John because of that second Kingsman film that he was briefly in?
That was where we first met,
okay.
Yeah. No, there wasn't an audition process. I had obviously, worked with Matthew before, and he didn't feel... He'd asked me to audition for Eddie the Eagle, but it was only one... It was just a 1 hour screen test with Hugh Jackman. But it didn't... Even then, it kind of didn't feel like an audition. Matthew, since we first met, who's the producer... and an old kind of colleague of Dexter's, friend and colleague of Dexter's, I think has always been very encouraging of me and my and my desire to try and play things that are quite different, and he's quite good at thinking outside the box and has given me a couple of opportunities to do that. And Rocketman was one of them. I think we're filming the sequel to Kingsman in about 3.5, approaching 4 years ago, and basically he asked me how I felt about playing Elton, and it was a kind of mad moment, really. I have to say that I can't pretend that I hadn't entertained it even before that. I was aware of the project. I'd been aware of it for a couple of years, and had always felt, because I knew it was a musical, and I always felt, well, that would be good. I'd be good for that. That's different. That's cool. And obviously, everything that we know about Elton, what a character to play. What a fascinating person. But at that stage, when I'd inquired to my agents about it, and I have exactly the same agents as Tom Hardy, who was then attached to do it.
Okay.
And what they'd said to me before that was, no, Tom's going to do it. They're just trying to find the time. So I'd forgotten about it.
Gotcha.
And then a couple of years later, Matthew approached me about it. And I think what had happened was he had been talking with Elton and David, and it just hadn't gotten off the ground. And Tom was kind of, approaching 40. And I started playing Elton in Rocketman at 17.
Right.
For the Saturday night. So that's for the Saturday night, so fighting sequence.
Yeah.
So I think Tom had just gotten too old, and I sort of very luckily was at the right sort of age, right time in life, halfway between 40 and 17, so I was right in the middle of where Elton needs to play. Yeah.
All of those, yeah.
Yeah, so, yes, and of course as well, Matthew had found out that I sang from Hugh Jackman, and I recorded a song for the end credits of Eddie the Eagle, and so it all just sort of came together fairly organically from there, really.
Yeah. It sounds like it's safe to say it's the biggest challenge of
a
role.
Yeah, I mean, for me it was another one of those things, as we were discussing earlier. It's a scary, intimidating thing to take on someone who's not only such a legend, but such a big personality. And but like everything, like we said, you've got to do the things that frighten you, because they, most of all, they're the ones that reward you. And it must have been end of 2017 where it was really it really started to feel like it was about to happen. So a year and a half later, it sat there for a little while.
Right. As it happens sometimes.
Yes, exactly. There's a lot of mechanics to filmmaking that I don't understand from a producer perspective, and financing and all of that. And but by 2018 we were sort of getting ready to go, and it was at the start of 2018 that I went into studio with Giles Martin, and we started spending a lot of time at Abbey Road, a few days a week, just recording vocals, recording temp instrumentals, and honestly just figuring out with Dex, as he developed the script, how the songs were going to weave their way into the story.
Okay.
Because they're not just sort of dropped in, they become sort of storytelling moments. The lyrics are used to try and move the story forward. But that felt like a really exciting creative process.
Yeah.
And it's just a wonderful bit of alchemy. We all kind of fell in love as mates, as a gang, me and Giles and Dex and Adam, the producer. It just all became it all felt right, and we all had a really good time, and it's one of those weird rarefied things where everyone just feels really happy and working really, really hard. It was a lot to take on in terms of becoming him and getting the music right and all of that.
Well, and I want to know how much you worked with Elton on becoming Elton, but it's so interesting, this idea of there was no set in stone script with every musical number planned beforehand. It's
there was a really good script, a script that had been around for years, Lee's script, but it's pretty typical that when a director comes on board, things shift a little bit.
Totally.
And Lee is a really lovely man and very very understanding of that process, and not precious about it at all.
Yeah.
And the structure of it, the idea of the rehab clinic, recounting from the rehab clinic, that was already in place. It's just a couple of song choices shifted to sort of for certain beats, and tonally the voice of the character, I think. Dexter maybe moved more towards something that he felt was more appropriate for me, and but yeah, it's all based on interviews with Elton. It's based on interviews with Elton about his life, and so yeah.
You must have done all that research, watched all those interviews.
Yeah, you go down a crazy rabbit hole, and you find some weird, obscure moments where Elton promoting an album in the 70s, and you do wonder where he'd been in the hours before it, because he was living a very specific type of lifestyle, I think.
Right.
But
you also have access to Elton, so are you balancing those two things of?
Yeah, I think for me and Elton, what happened was that we just got on very, very well. I think we got on in a way that you can't quite predict for. You can't quite.
Sure.
You imagine you're going to get along and it'll be a good working relationship, but then you start to really become close with somebody and spend time with them. And Elton, invited me to go and stay, and now we're sort of. Now I speak to him a few times a week. I don't really have that relationship with many people. It's a strange thing, but wonderful. And a few things happened before we start. Basically, what the relationship with Elton did was it made it feel very, very personal and very real and very important. And I've never really. You fall in love with all the characters you play, and they of course feel very, very important. But it happened in a very, very charged way with Elton. I've said it before in interviews, but he did this thing very early on before we started filming, a couple of months before we started filming. My girlfriend and I were staying at his house for a couple of nights, and we were sat in his drawing room, and he leant over and gave me this thing, just dropped it in my hand, and it's a rather large diamond earring, and he said that's the first diamond earring I ever bought. And he said it would have been in about 72 or maybe 73.
Okay.
And I just could not believe that he'd do this, give me this incredible thing. And I went away and asked Julian Day, costume designer extraordinaire, if he would be okay with me wearing it,
using it.
Yeah, I'd had my ear pierced for the role earlier on before this, but and then Elton gave me this thing, and
it's in the film.
And it's in the film.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you ever rewatch Rocketman, through the rehab scenes, bits of my costume start to come off.
Right.
And that was great fun, planning all that out, mapping out when all that is. I actually asked Julian, there's a scene in the movie where I take my horns off, and I asked Julian if he would make me. Julian had to design that for me so that I could do it in the scene. But as I take the neoprene hood off, which happens at quite an emotional moment in the film, it reveals, you can just see that I'm wearing this little diamond earring, and that is Elton John's first ever diamond earring, which I still have in a safe.
It's in a safe.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, because it's like a real life dramaturgy. You're getting it straight from the source, and
it's like a sort of talisman. It sort of felt like a kind of like a little magic token. I don't know, it was a really lovely thing. It was a lovely gesture, and it made it what it did. It was such a gesture that it made it feel like it made our friendship feel as important as the movie we were making. And so it just meant that when I it made feeling like him and becoming him, it made it feel very organic and natural, and I just felt very emotionally available as him. I never felt like all of that anger and pain and sadness that we see Elton experiencing on the journey, all just came very easily. I felt it all very easily. I felt it in a way that required no kind of forcing. So it was a wonderful thing to do, and I think I sort of attribute that in part to him giving me that little talisman.
It makes him not a big invulnerable, like, faraway rock star. Like, he's a human, and I feel like the task facing you guys in this film was to make him human. Not
Yeah,
human,
absolutely.
But to make him small scale. Like,
well, it's a celebration of a human being. You know, he is, of course, he is a rock god, but he's a human being.
Yeah.
And we try to celebrate him as a human being as well as a legend. Because if you just celebrate him as a legend, it can feel a little bit, it would feel disingenuous, I think, because he's not without his flaws, and he's not without his problems in life. And I think, you know, what he's experienced and gone through is so a part of who he is that to sidestep all of that would be something of a disservice to him and his legacy, I think. And that's always what really excited me about the script. You know, what we're going to tell the story from rehab. That's crazy, isn't it? You can't do that. But, you know, I think that it's quite a brave thing to do, I think, on his part especially. Yeah, I just love that about the movie. I think it's, you know, I just don't think I can't think of another example of a movie about someone so well known that does that.
Right, and like you were saying, it could easily just be so big, larger than life that it's cartoonish, or... Yeah,
and the idea was always to, you know, the scenes, you know, we have these kind of outlandish, fantastical moments in the movie, but we really seek to ground it and root it with, I suppose, at the heart of it, a performance that feels believable and real. The performance isn't, you know, the scenes, it's elevated in a way, but it's not... Yeah, I really hope it's not cartoonish. We never wanted to try and achieve that.
No, and I think every musical number is so different from the last. And like you said, it does move the story along in ways that I didn't think Elton John's songs could.
Yeah, well, people often say, "Oh God," people will say, "Oh, I didn't know the lyrics meant that." And we'll go, actually, to be honest, I don't think they do. We just use them in that way. You know, if you ask Elton and Bernie what Benny and the Jets mean, you know, they'll say, we don't really know. You know, I think but that's, you know, all of the best art, I think, is sort of open to a little bit of interpretation. I think Bernie's lyrics are very much that. There's a poetry to them and a sort of, they're not literal, and that quality in them makes them great storytelling devices.
Totally, for especially for a big screen movie musical.
Well, because you can use them in ways that, you know, that you can use because they don't have a specific meaning. I don't think you can kind of tailor them to your purpose.
Totally. It's beautiful. It's awesome. I want to add, we got to wrap soon. We're all about the advice. We're all about the audition advice. Do you ever give like number one piece of audition advice for early career actors? Or something you wish you'd known?
I had a very weird relationship with auditions because I really enjoyed them.
Okay.
And the only times I didn't enjoy them was when I hadn't prepared enough.
Okay.
You know, doing something, I think the longer you've known the text, the longer you've spent with it, you know, far better to look at something for 45 minutes over 5 nights than for 2 hours on one night.
Gotcha.
And, you know, I think you have to do whatever you can do to make it feel like when you're in that room, you really have to own the space a bit. You know, I think those prospective employers want to see an assuredness and a calmness in you that, you know, makes them believe that you're a good candidate for the job, as well as what you do with it interpretively. But I just think it's about preparation and confidence, and you've got to do whatever you've got to do to get yourself ready and in a good place to perform and to act when you go into the room. But for me, it's about enjoying them. You have to enjoy them. It's, you know, if you aren't enjoying that feeling of expression and creativity that comes with, you know, performing language, speaking words, then no one's going to enjoy watching you, I don't think. That's my 2 cents on it. So it's do whatever you've got to do to be able to be relaxed enough to enjoy auditions. Yeah. And the part of that is, I love that it's the preparing that's a huge part of that. Is there such a thing as over-preparing? Is there preparing just the right amount? I think if you prepare to a point, when I say prepare, it means know your text as well as you possibly can. It doesn't mean manufacture a rigid performance that you can't be fluid with, because that is absolutely, I think, key, is that feeling of, it's about surprise. I think when you're acting, you should surprise yourself, you should surprise the people around you. It should feel, I think there's a lot to be said for rhythm and playing with the rhythm of the way you do things, and just, keeping it alive, really. And because if something's rigid and over-prepared and really manufactured, I think it's inherently dead, and you should be in a situation. It's very hard, because when you go and read in those auditions, you're not always offered a great deal in terms of what the other performer is offering you, because quite often you're not reading with an actor, you might be reading with a casting director. No disrespect to casting directors, but but you respond to what the other scene partner is offering you, and I think a bit of putting yourself in a position where actually you have to know it so well that you can forget about it, and that's a hard thing to do, because you can't, if you don't know it well enough, you're trying to hold it in your mind as well as be free with your acting, and it just can't be done. So the preparation comes with knowing your text inside out, and I mean, I just can't imagine if I haven't done that, I'm not good. I can't act. You're going to be miserable. Well, I just can't act well. I'm trying to think about the lines and not. You have to know it so well that you can completely forget about it when you're in the room, and that's how you find freedom with it, I think. Yeah, and focus on that thing, the RADA thing of listening. It comes down to exactly. You can't be focused on the other person and listening to them if you are thinking in your head, "What's your next line?" Yeah, you have to forget it. You have to remember it so you can forget about it. Excellent. And that's very hard to do at short notice, which of course sometimes auditions are, but generally, if you have an audition in 7 days, don't wait 3 or 4 to start looking at the script. And spread it out. The 45 minutes per night thing is a good tip. Yeah, I just think that you remember things over an extended period of time. The more you sleep on something, it goes into a different layer of your memory, I think. Sure. I'm not a sleep scientist, as you can tell. I'm just speaking from personal experience. No, but that's excellent advice. But yeah, that would be my advice. What's one piece of advice, maybe career advice or life advice, that you would give your younger self? When I was in my teens, I wish that I had been less concerned with what other people thought of me. And I think it's really important to remember, particularly when you are in your teens, and it's a horrible, tough time, that if you feel self-conscious, you just got to remember that absolutely everybody around you feels exactly the same way, and no one is looking at you. You can feel... I remember feeling on edge and slightly self-aware, and it was just such a waste of energy, because everyone's busy worrying about their own thing, and it's such a great time, that those teenage years, if you can enjoy them, and I sort of think I was a little bit preoccupied with what everybody around me thought of me, rather than just being authentic. Well, and it's good that you weren't too self-conscious about making that initial leap to enrolling in that drama school and playing Thisbe. Yeah. Like, if you had given in to being self-conscious and not putting yourself out there, it wouldn't happen. Yeah, there's definitely a version of myself that would have just said, I'm not doing that. Yeah. In fact, when I went home the first night, I think I told my mum, you want to quit? I'm not doing it. Wow. Because, it was just, at 15, you're not... Oh, yeah. You're not. I personally wasn't relaxed and assured enough and confident enough in my own skin, to put on a dress. Like you said, no one is. Now you'd struggle to keep me out of a dress. Yeah, exactly. But at that age, I wasn't fully formed yet. No, and, no one is. Yeah. So that as well. That's just to my former self. I'm not saying for a second that all 15-year-olds are quite as self-conscious as I was, but I'd imagine there's a few. Well, like you said, Saoirse Ronan at young age. Yeah, I mean, she's one in a million, isn't she? Yeah, I guess she is. Yeah. That was really a stunning... I don't know how those kid actors do it. I don't know. I mean, she's just got a really crazy talent. Yeah, I think that even... I think even super accomplished actors in the later years in their life look at her and sort of go, how the hell does she do that? Totally. Yeah. It is all about vulnerability. That's such a great,
philosophy, like acting credo of yours?
It's tough, to be an actor and to do it well. I think you've got to have a thin skin. You've got to show things about yourself. You've got to reveal things about yourself through a character. The trouble is that then, you're scrutinised and often judged for it, so then you've got to have a very thick skin, which is tough, because they're two sort of polarised.
There's those contradictions you're talking about.
Yeah, quite.
Thin and thick, yeah. Taron, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Give us some
Thanks, Jack.
This is very wise stuff.
Well, I don't know. Maybe. It does feel I wouldn't normally presume to give advice at the tender age of 29 I am, but since you asked.
Thank you.
In the Envelope, an awards podcast, is recorded at Lotus Productions and Hyperbolic Audio in New York City and Soundbox LA, Mark Gross Studios, and Buzzies in Los Angeles. Thanks as always to podcast producer extraordinaire Jamie Muffett and to the team at Backstage, Samantha Sherlock, Mark Stinson, Caitlin Watkins, and of course Kasey Howe. Visit Backstage.com, and don't forget, you can subscribe to Backstage by using the code ENVELOPE at checkout for a free trial. That's right, 100% free. For more exclusive content, join us on Facebook and Twitter at In the Envelope, and subscribe, share, and leave a comment. Who would you like us to interview next? Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time for another glimpse in the Envelope.